So even after I got married, there was still a lot of pressure to get married again. It was interesting because I wasn't very high on the biological hierarchy. Growing up, I would watch pretty much all of the girls my age would marry the same like five guys.
Whoa.
But after, having a family of my own, I was still expected to look for more. And my wife at the time would have direction for me. She was so sure that I was supposed to marry this girl and bring her into the family. All of her older sisters lived polygamy. Two of her older sisters married my dad.
Whoa.
When I initially told Daniel back in 2011 so that he would stop coming at me with direction, he told me that I was gay because I had too much chicken, that there's hormones in chicken. He told me that it's because I work too much, and he was explaining to me how if I leave, then I'm basically going to go to the deepest depths of hell.
Hey, my name is Shelise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening, it would be so much better for us if you could go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. It really helps boost the algorithm, helps more people find us, and of course, the ads help make sure that we can continue to do this work and share more stories and do this as full-time as we do. So today's guest, we were connected from Amanda Ray, once again, from The Order, which is a fundamentalist polygamous sect of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormonism. So we're going to be talking about what it was like for him growing up in the order, actually getting married, having 7 children, being kind of pushed to try polygamy. He never did, but then actually coming out as gay and leaving the order and what that was like for him. So thank you so much for joining us, Nephi Robinson.
Thank you for having me, Shelise.
Yes, of course. And we're so happy to have you here. So let's talk a little bit about your family dynamic, the family that you came from before you got married.
So I am my mom's second of 13 kids, and she is wife number 3 for John Daniel Kingston. For Daniel, I am child number about 13 of 100 and something. I don't really know how many kids he has, but that's where I fall in with that family.
Yeah, you are brother to Val, who we've interviewed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Also Allison.
And Allison, half brothers to both of them, but we're siblings as far as anybody's concerned.
Right, because I think Val said that the guesstimate is about 163 kids from Daniel.
Yeah, it's around 160, I don't know.
That's quite a few siblings to keep track of. Do you feel like you know all of your siblings?
I do not know all of my siblings. And they, sometimes when I see them out in the world, they will catch me not knowing them. And it's super embarrassing.
Oh, no.
They know me. So.
Oh, no. They know you because you're officially the black sheep who left, right?
That does make me popular.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like when you're the older part of the older kids, then your people are more aware of you.
Right.
And probably that's with all of the moms. My dad has 14 wives. And I feel like it's easier to know the older kids. But after like 2, then they're just a bunch of kids and we don't know them. So
that makes sense. So I'm interested to talk to you because you have this sort of parentification role that was placed on you because you were the older kids, you and your sister. And we talked to your brother Joe, your full brother, who was the 9th child, and he was saying that he thought that you were his dad until he was about age 6 because of how much you were in charge of taking care of them. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, you know what? For us older kids growing up, it felt like we were free-range children, and we would be left alone, home alone a lot, and so we could do a lot of stuff and we can get away with a lot of stuff because there was no adult there to do anything about it. But as we got to be around like 8 or 10 years old, then we became more the parental figures, and we were held responsible for making sure that the kids got fed and that people were doing their jobs and that they got to school and that they were clean and wearing clean clothes. So before we were teenagers, we were already putting babies to sleep and changing diapers and just taking care of the kids like a parent would, I guess.
Wow.
So I got a lot of practice on being a parent.
Yeah. I mean, some people would say they would enjoy that lifestyle, but what did you think of it? Did you like it?
I didn't really know anything different, I guess. My peers that I would hang out with were just other siblings from the other families, and so it felt very normal.
Yeah. I can imagine that'd be really hard as a young kid being responsible for children younger than you. I mean, I think I started babysitting around 13. That's the youngest that they would let me because I was really excited to babysit. It's also very common with Mormon girls because they teach you from 12 how to be a mom, right? And so I was ready. But 8 to 10, that's so young to put that responsibility on someone. And let's talk about why that's kind of the case. Aside from the obvious of having a lot of kids and needing some help, I think we need to talk about how the women in the order are generally responsible for the income and they're supposed to give their money to their husband.
Yeah, so my mom was Daniel's third wife, and she was always working because she had to provide for the family. Daniel would, growing up, I remember him coming around once a month. So he wasn't providing for the needs of the family as much as my mom was. And my mom would rent the house from Daniel. Daniel would buy some cheap houses, and he would, I was one of the older ones, so I would help fix them up, and I've helped fix up the houses that for multiple moms. And then the mom would rent the house from Daniel. And so, she's not going to get evicted and she's not going to get foreclosed on. She doesn't have to worry about that, but she's responsible for paying rent. And if she doesn't, then she'll just go behind on her statement.
Oh my gosh. I just have to stop you for a sec because
Yeah.
that is mind blowing that she has to pay rent to her husband and she's responsible of making all the money to feed all 13 children and he's just not even around, not supporting, not providing, or did he provide in any sort of way?
I think it was based somewhat on the need that the mom had. But the thing too is the moms would go and work for Daniel. And some of the moms worked with me as I worked with them with A1 disposal or advanced copy. And I was in a position where I would see, what they were being paid. And basically they were paid just enough to max out their food stamps. So they really didn't have the income to do anything different than to rent from Daniel. So they would pay rent to Daniel and they would work for Daniel at a low pay so that they can, survive. And that's what they were supposed to do.
Wait a second. So there's a second layer of them
Mm-hmm.
working for him and it sounds like he's just giving them an allowance.
Yeah. They're supposed to look to him to he's the one above for them. So they're supposed to go to him to figure out where they're supposed to work. And because Daniel was responsible for a lot of stewardships, he would have them work for him.
I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole structure because you have a family where you are expected to have as many children as possible, and we'll talk about this in a second. And then the wife is supposed to, on top of taking care of as many children as possible, she's required to work so that she can take care of these kids. But she's working for her husband, getting bare minimum, and on top of that, paying him rent for a property that he owns.
Either him or the order. It was usually his own house. He was the stewardship for that house in most cases.
Yeah, okay. It's just blowing my mind a bit. And something that I want to talk about is how the kids are also expected to work, but they don't really have access to their money. It's also going straight to dad. So do you want to talk about that?
So that was a little bit different for me, I think, because when I worked with my mom, she always made sure I got paid. And it was a really low wage sometimes, but would go to my statement. And, there was a flip side to that too. As soon as I was working, I was expected to buy my own clothes and to support myself more. And then when I started college pretty young and I was expected to pay my tuition and, buy my books and things. So my mom made sure I got paid. At the same time, I also had to pay for myself a lot more than a lot of kids do. But I never had to pay rent myself. And I personally never had to pay child support. And again, I think that's just because my mom was industrious enough to be able to do it without my help.
Right. And I think you just mentioned that casually. Like, I wasn't expected to pay child support. And people are probably thinking, why would he have to pay child support if he's a child himself? So can you explain that a little bit?
So I observed a lot of other kids having to pay rent to their parents, to their mom, or help pay child support. I've observed a lot of kids working for Daniel's stewardships that weren't getting paid. And, he would set up some kind of deal sometimes to allegedly have some kind of a trade thing where he's providing their education. He gets really creative when it comes time to pay kids. If you get paid, then you're one of the lucky ones, and I always was, and again, because of my mom, but I was in a position to see a lot of kids that were working, and I know that they weren't getting paid, but I wasn't one of them.
And how young were you when you had your first, technically like your first job?
My first regular job was about 11, but I remember doing night shift when I was 9. So just whatever the stewardships needed. And when I was younger, I feel like that there was more weight on us to work at the stewardships because there was such a need there. I feel like lately the families have grown faster than the stewardships have, and I don't think that they're very good businessmen. So I feel like that the working age is getting higher now more because the stewardships just there's not as strong of a need there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was younger, if you could go to work, then you was.
What were you doing?
Especially, going to work for the farm. I was working at the copy shop, so I was binding, the folder, using the cutter, and there was all kinds of just tasks that we would do at the copy shop. Advanced copy is what it was called back in the day. Or working on the farm up in Washakie.
Okay. So let's talk about your family dynamic as far as what you observed your mom going through or what you went through with Daniel specifically.
So growing up in one of Daniel's houses, he would only come around about once a month, and we didn't really know when he was coming. But sort of out of the blue, my mom would get a phone call, and then from that phone call, we have to hurry and get the house ready, and everything had to be spotless clean, and we had to hurry and make dinner, and instantly we had to be ready for Daniel to come over. And then he would come over and, he was taken care of by my mom and fed dinner and different things. And I would get a chance to see a little bit of their interaction. And it was strange to me because I felt like he would treat her like she's dumb.
Mm.
And he would talk down to her quite often. And at the same time, he tried to act like he was friendly. And sometimes he was friendly. And it was interesting having him as a dad because when I was younger, I didn't understand the concept of a father figure. He would just come around every now and then when he was there, we had to make sure that he was taken care of. And he would be nice to us for the most part, but you really had to watch because it felt like you were on eggshells because he could change in an instant and somebody's getting slapped or for whatever reason, he doesn't like what somebody's doing. Some of the people that you've had on before have discussed that there would be meditations in the morning and family prayer and the memory gems. And if you weren't meditating right, or if you weren't doing something, or if you were doing something that he was bothered with, you could be getting slapped instantly. And so when he was nice, then it was good, but we were still very careful and really just tried to avoid him. And I think it was different when we were younger because he had less wives. But after he had his third wife, my mom was the third, then he started just taking on wives quickly. Mm-hmm. And even though he only had 14 wives, I remember him coming around once a month, and I made a mental note of it because when he did come, it was a stressful time period for us. So if he came then in June or whatever, then I would just assume that he was not coming back again until July. So as long as it was still June, we were still safe. But growing up, as soon as he was home, then it was a hostile environment. So, yeah. But it was only about once a month, so it wasn't so bad.
Do you think, looking back, was he timing it to your mother's cycle?
Yeah. There was times when he would come a couple times a week. I don't know if I should go into this much detail. I had the unfortunate experience of my entire teenage years. My room was under theirs. Mm-hmm. So it was confusing when he would show up, more than once a month. But then I also was in a position where I could be aware that it was mating season.
Oh my
because of my proximity in the house.
Mating season.
So this is this is how I thought of it as a teenager. Mm-hmm. As okay, that's why he's here because this is going on. And then, so my mom was very private about everything, and so was Daniel. But just because of where I was at, then I knew, and that's what it was in my head. It was it's that season, and so he's going to be here a couple times a week, and then a few months later we would have another sibling. But other than that, then it was just once a month.
Wow.
That was too much information.
It's never too much information for this show. Let me just tell you, the more detail, the better. We appreciate it. Right. Let's talk about why they're expected to have so many children.
Growing up, then we are taught that we have predestined families. So before we were born, we were already married to who our number one choice is. And we've already told them that we would marry them. And we both agreed that we would bring these children down. We've told those children that we will. And if we don't marry our number one choice, or if we don't have all of the children that we're supposed to have, then we are told that when we pass away and go to the afterlife, then we're going to have to explain to them why we didn't do what we were supposed to do and bring them down. But we never know how many kids we're supposed to have. So as far as we understand, it's as many as we can possibly have. So the girls will generally marry young and have kids as often and as long as they can. And if you're a mom that has, like, say 15 kids, then you are looked upon as somebody who's doing better than somebody who has 9 or 10.
15.
And there's a lot of moms in this religion that have 15 or more. My younger sister has more than that. So
she has more than 15 kids? At
least 15, but as far as I know, it's at least 16, but I don't know. It's been a few years since I've kept up on her, but she's younger than me, and she's already at least there. So
I
only have 7.
Shook. You go, I only have 7. I only have 1, and I'm exhausted, Nephi.
Oh, it's the greatest thing in the world.
You're an angel. That's amazing. So I'm curious if you've ever watched Saturday's Warriors, the Mormon movie. So
yes.
For those who aren't familiar, it's like, we've talked about it before, but I just wondered if you knew, because it's this exact premise where this Mormon family keeps having all these kids, and the oldest son is getting made fun of at school, like, oh, your mom's gonna have another baby. And then the whole thing is him, like, not wanting to be a part of the family, and he's embarrassed, and the kids who are the cool kids are like motorcycle gang, and they're trying to stray him from the truth. And then meanwhile, his little sister is up in heaven. It's like, don't forget about me. It's just like, it's so weird.
Remember your promise, Jimmy.
Jimmy, remember your promise, Jimmy. Yeah. I wonder if I could find some footage. I think I put it in Amanda's episode once. I'll try and insert a little clip, but it's just really cringy.
Come on, Jim, let's go.
Don't forget your promise. Jimmy, please.
Hey, Flinders, no Flinders. Come on, we got to go, Flinders. You'll never find it here, Flinders. Believe me, I'm your friend.
Jimmy, oh Jimmy, don't listen to them. How can they say you're your friends if they take you away from your family and home? They'll leave you alone at the end. Now is it time?
Just a few more seconds, honey. Now remember, child, this family that you're going to is one of the very best, but it's still a risky proposition. It's a stormy place down there, and it's a stormy Saturday night. Be courageous and remember who you are.
I love you, Emily.
It's funny because you're the oldest son and your mom has 13 kids, but in your situation, you were actually seen as the cool kid because your mom had so many kids.
Yeah, 13 is probably average, though. So even when I was growing up, then, I guess when I was growing up and hanging out with my peers, we only had 9, so we didn't have a whole lot, but it's just average to have around that.
It's just average. So because of that, are you expecting and are you wanting and excited to have 13 kids of your own when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was expecting that. For some reason, I just accepted the role that was offered to me, but around 10 years old, then I just assumed that I would get married and have as many kids as I could. And I don't remember why I had to feel that when I was 10 years old. Like, why couldn't I just be a 10-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was looking forward to having a dozen or more kids.
And that's something that they're teaching you at a young age. And there was something that you mentioned on Val's interview about how sometimes girls are even betrothed or promised to men by the time they're 12.
It happens. I think that most of them are later than that. I think before they're 18 and probably around 70%, that's on the low side. But I would say probably around 70% of the girls are married or betrothed before they're 18. But sometimes it is as young as 12, or I know of cases that happen younger. But I think 16 is the prime time for these girls. So if you're 16 and you're in this group, you're probably going to have a full dance card because all these men are single. And if they are going to have any chance of being married or betrothed to you, then that's when they have to get their foot in the door. So 16, I think, is probably the most common age. But by the time they're 18, then most of them are married or betrothed.
So I've been watching a lot of Bridgerton lately.
Okay.
And it feels very similar as far as the dance cards and like writing your name down. And then if you dance with them, then there's a good chance that they're going to come forward on you and ask for your hand in marriage. It just feels so 1800s, like late 1800s. Is that what it's like? Can you explain the dance cards for us?
Well, it is probably, I haven't seen Bridgerton, but I think it probably does have a lot of the same ideas as the late 1800s, but it's been modernized. And I think that Daniel has a lot to do with that. There is a list of all of the kids that are not married, and it has their ages and their parents' names. And Daniel would have prep for marriage classes with his boys or meetings. And I think that he would have them generally about once a month. And he would he'd pull up this Excel sheet and just kind of divvy out, okay, these are the girls that you need to have on your dance card, and make sure that they're dancing with you. And on top of that, then sometimes he would ask us if we've had direction on a particular girl, ask us if we can pray, if we should have direction on a particular girl. So if you're not having direction on your own, then sometimes our parents would tell us who we need to try to have direction on. And that's what it felt like. And me being gay, I didn't really have a lot of direction on a lot of girls.
Right.
There was different situations, even from my ex and from my mom, some of the other moms, and Daniel especially, where he was coming to me, asking me if I've had direction on a particular girl and if I could be praying about that.
What I find interesting is within your interview with Val, you mentioned that direction, it's basically having this feeling of, I think I'm supposed to marry this person, right? It's like an inner knowing, or if you have a dream about them. But then at the same time, it's sinful to have romantic thoughts about someone of the opposite sex before you're married. So how do they get around that?
When I was younger, it was my understanding that the primary way you get direction is you have a dream. If you didn't have a dream, you probably didn't have direction. But now that I'm older, I can see how easily that can be manipulated. People would have dreams about all kinds of things, direction being one of them. But if you're supposed to work somewhere, then they might have a dream. And people will have dreams for you all the time. And they'll come and bless you with that and share that with you. But when I was growing up, then dreams were the number one way that you would have direction. Another way is just a strong impression, they would call it. Or if different family members are having direction for you, then you would take that into consideration and see if you can come up with your own direction.
Okay. So it really is as simple, and it's not simple because you drew this whole diagram, but as simple as, I have a feeling I'm supposed to marry this person. I'm going to go put myself on their dance card or add them to mine. We're going to dance at these young single adult or not even adult events. And then I will go forward on her. So let's explain this whole process, starting with the dances, because I have to know what that even looks like. Give us an idea of what kind of dance you're actually doing and what is expected of you and the girls and all of that.
You know what? The dances are probably the number one social event for a child in the order. And they're a lot of fun. As you mentioned, we're not supposed to have any feelings or impressions or emotions for a particular girl. You're not supposed to be developing feelings for the opposite sex until you're engaged. And you're also not supposed to be in the same room alone with them. And there's different rules regarding that. But when you're at the dance, then there's more rules at the dance. So you have to be so far apart. And, obviously your hand has to be in the right area. And those are all good things. But there's a lot of people there, and the boys are supposed to be dancing every single dance pretty much. Once you're done with a dance, and you ask another girl, and you just kind of go around the room and asking every girl in the room if you can. And the girls just wait for somebody to ask them. So, there's some girls that are constantly being asked to dance, and then there's some girls that aren't getting asked to dance very much. And I guess that's probably similar to any environment.
Yeah, except this is like, if you don't get asked to dance, you might not get a proposition in marriage, it feels like.
Yeah, spilling some tea too. If you are capable of bearing a child, you will be asked for marriage. So somebody will come forward on you if you're capable of bearing a child, even if you have mental disabilities or other things. Even if you don't really want to get married, there will be men coming forward. Because there's a lot of men who are single until they're 40 or beyond. And so if you're a man and you're not very high on the biological hierarchy, then you might only have a shot at some of these other girls that the Kingston boys aren't interested in. So if you're a female, you're going to get married if you're capable of bearing children. If you're a male, we'll see what happens.
Right, because that's how it works in a regular society with polygamy. And if one guy has multiple wives, someone's going to end up with 0 wives.
Yeah.
Okay, what kind of music are you dancing to? I'm imagining square dancing or waltzing or like something very formal. I can't imagine R&B going down in these dances.
No.
So explain what that's like.
You know what? There's like a playlist that they have, and there's some fun songs. They're mostly older songs. I think they got some Eddie Rabbitt in there, some Dire Straits. There's a lot of fun songs that they play, but it's basically that playlist, and it's from an older generation, and that's what you have. Sometimes they will put some modern songs in there, but they stick to tradition, I guess, when it comes to the songs and the dances.
Okay, so no particular style. Maybe it's just like those awkward teen dances where you just kind of rock back and forth.
Well, they are actually very particular in the dancing style. Most of the time you do the foxtrot. There is no freestyle dancing for the most part. There's the foxtrot, there's the waltz, there's the ginger rail, there's line dances, and they really do get into the style that you have there, and you are expected to learn how to dance, and they will have dance classes in the elementary and other opportunities before the dance to learn how to jitterbug or do different styles of swing. So
okay, this is what I'm talking about, Nephi. I was like, give me the deets.
Yep.
All right, so we can move on from the dances. I just wanted to get a visual of what that looked like. Okay, so as a teenager, what were your feelings? Because you're probably feeling pressured by Daniel, by your dad, by whoever to start going forward on people, on women or girls. But at this point, are you recognizing that you have attraction for men?
Yeah, you know what? Growing up, I was just always taught that you do what Heavenly Father wants you to do, whether you want to do it or not. And there wasn't really ever a question of what do you want to do? It was never something that you would consider. And so, I did understand that I was attracted to men. And I was of a generation that didn't have the order schools. Pretty much all of the kids younger than me went to the order schools, but I went to public school. So I did get some proper maturation classes, and I feel like I was better educated. But in my generation, even in public school, being gay was a terrible thing. I went to middle school where the football players jumped and beat up a gay person. So even outside of the group, being gay was terrible. So I understood what I was. I didn't want to admit it to myself, and I couldn't have vocalized it. But I just believed that whether I enjoy it or not, I need to go and start a family and procreate the earth and do my job.
Okay, you were just doing what you thought was your duty because you didn't feel like you had any other options.
Yeah, and I felt a lot of shame for it. And I think a lot of even LDS boys that grow up gay, they're being fed such a narrative about it.
Yeah.
And like many of them, I tried so hard to not be. And I fasted and, prayed many times. And I don't know if I want to go into too deep a detail in that, but the way I understood it is I was instilled with something that is anti-marriage and anti-life and anti-procreation and terrible. And the way I believed when I was a teenager is that I was valiant enough in the pre-existence to be able to be born into the order, but not valiant enough to really have a place here. And like, I really didn't believe that I deserved to be there and that I deserved to live. And, I was very suicidal when I was a teenager. And so I feel like that's part of why I latched onto my role as an older brother, is because it gave me a reason to be here.
Yeah.
I really needed a reason to be alive, because being gay was so terrible that, and I did understand what it was. So being gay was such a terrible thing that, I just did what I could to deserve to be alive, I guess. So,
Wow. That's so difficult. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
and I see that with a lot of the LDS boys too, that have grown up with that kind of a narrative.
Yeah, because even in the mainstream LDS church, they say that they accept gay people, except they kind of don't. I mean, they say that you can be gay, you just can't act on it. It's so awful that they can't just be accepting. I'm wondering what the messages were like in the order, specifically if you had lessons around homosexuality and if they used scripture verses to kind of tell you it was wrong, or if they just avoided it and it was taboo and you just didn't even talk about it.
I feel like it was more the taboo side of things. As far as the scriptures and the lessons in church, they didn't talk about it. They didn't go into, can you be gay and still be here? It just didn't exist. As far as the churches and the programs were, gay just wasn't a thing that you were. But in the culture, then they was very homophobic. There was constantly jokes and slurs, and when somebody was recognized as gay on TV or whatever, then when Ellen came out, then there was things said about that. And just so many derogatory words were used to describe somebody who's gay, just in the culture in general. But as far as the Sunday school lessons, it just didn't exist.
That must have been so hard as a kid, because you're trying to fit in and you're trying to find purpose and you feel like something is inherently wrong with you, even though there's not. But you have to sort of hide yourself. Did you confide in anybody at a young age about your feelings, or did you have to just, oh, you didn't? What was that like for you?
You know what? Just being one of my mom's older kids and being in Daniel's family and working so young, I was so busy. And there was a time where I was just so severely depressed as a teenager. And I was basically flunking out of school. And instead of Daniel and my mom asking me what's happening, because I feel like when a teenager is going through some things, and it will reveal itself outside of that. And there were symptoms of it. So I was basically flunking out of high school. And so instead of asking me what's going on, I sort of heard some murmurings in their rooms, but they didn't come to me with that. Daniel came up with the idea to have me go to college, and that high school was not where an order boy should be anyways. So they had forged my birth certificate to get me into kindergarten early. And so they just forged it again to get me into college early. And so they kept me so busy, working, taking care of my mom's kids, going to college as a teenager. And I was so busy, I didn't have time to talk to anybody about it.
Yeah.
And, I grew up in an outside school, but it was also told that I can't associate with outsiders. So I was used to being a loner and not having people to talk to about anything, and just having to live my life serving and working every day, but not discussing what I'm dealing with. So.
Wow, that's so hard. What did you go to college for? Did they choose what you had to go for?
Yeah, Daniel has a whole program, and I think that there's a lot of kids that have some fun experiences with his college program, but he was having me go for manufacturing. And then, after I did get an associate's degree, then there was more of a discussion of what I want to do. But whatever you want to do, Daniel has an idea of what he wants you to do. And even though there would be classes that aren't required for that degree, he's gonna come up with his own program, and you need to go take the classes that he thinks you should thinks you should go to. So that's a whole spiel on itself.
Yeah. And how old were you if they forged your birth certificate when you went to college?
I turned 15 in my first semester.
What? Nephi, that's crazy.
Yeah. And it's not because I was like doing so well in school that I needed to jump up and go to college. It was because I really wasn't doing well. And they, instead of trying to figure out how to help me to do well where I was at, they just came up with another plan.
That makes total sense. He isn't getting the he isn't doing well with academics. Let's give him harder academics. Like, what?
And I had to pay my own tuition. And I remember my mom getting upset with me because I paid my first semester's tuition late and got a late fee. She told me that if I want to be a grown-up, for some reason being a grown-up was supposed to be a good thing. If I want to be a grown-up, then I need to be more responsible and take care of those things. But yeah, so I was just so busy and there were so many expectations growing up that I think it distracted me from trying to find solutions on taking care of myself.
Wow, that's so hard. She's saying if you want to be a grown up, but you're not a grown up, you're 15 years old. You're not even 18. And even then, it's like I see 18-year-olds now and I'm like, they're little. When I was 18, I was like, I'm all grown up, moved to Vegas, the whole thing. But I look back at graduates and I'm like, wow, they're still so young.
Yeah.
When did you go forward on your now ex-wife?
There was a whole process to that because I wasn't going forward on her. I did go through the courting process and more with a couple other girls, and one girl, it was more just to say that I wasn't their choice. And I was just doing it because that's what I believed, that if I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do and have a life I'm supposed to have, then that's what you do. And, the other boys, my age were doing that. But when it came to my now ex, then I thought that she was probably going to marry my younger brother. And so I was avoiding any kind of direction or moving forward with any kind of direction on her. I was being told that I was supposed to marry her and I was supposed to pray about her and I was supposed to try to have direction. But I did believe that I wasn't the one and that she would, and that I was probably, I like to think of a term called a buffer boy.
Mm-hmm.
And a buffer boy is somebody that a girl will probably have direction on. And Daniel explained this to me one time a little bit. He says that sometimes a girl will be thinking about leaving the order, but he will let them sort of think that they might have a chance at marrying a boy that they like, but really that's just to keep them in the order. And then when her number one choice actually comes forward or she has direction on him, then that will work out. But in the meantime, this buffer boy will keep her here.
Wow.
So I felt like I was my ex's buffer boy and that she was going to end up with my younger brother.
Okay.
So, and then, he came up to me with direction that it wasn't him, it was me. And there was just so much pressure to come forward. So I finally did. And then it just happened like in a matter of hours. And then a couple of days later, I was engaged, and I didn't plan on I didn't actually ask her to marry me. And so I didn't plan on being engaged. And it just happened before I recognized that it was going to happen. So
that is wild. Let's talk about this process for those who aren't familiar. You drew a fabulous graph, which we don't have, but if you could just explain how it works to get to the girl if you go forward on someone, which in your case you didn't really do that process, but the normal process of getting a wife.
So normally a boy will feel like he has direction on a girl, and then he will go to his one above, his dad, and he will explain his direction to him, and maybe that was in the form of a dream, whatever it is, then he'll explain that direction to the dad, and then the dad will go to the one above him, and then the one above him will go to the one above him all the way up to the leader of the order, Brother Paul. And then if Brother Paul says it's okay, then that boy can go to that girl's one above. If there's somebody in between her and her dad, then that boy will go to him. But generally the boy will go to the dad and explain his direction. And then the dad can decide if he should go forward and talk to the girl. Now, in the meantime, the girl sort of has that same path, but in the reverse direction. But generally what happens is multiple boys will come forward for a particular girl, and then the dad will decide who gets to get put on the list for her choices. And if she even has a choice, and it varies quite a bit. A lot of stewards do it differently, but they have the same idea, but each steward will control the process a little bit more than the others. And it depends on the girl too. Sometimes a girl will be so tied in with one above that she'll basically be like, Daddy, who should I marry? And the dad will just basically tell her who her number one choice is and only give her that choice. And I think that each steward gauges where their daughter is at. But for the most part, what I've seen is the dad will sort of collect the names of the boys that feel like they have had direction on her. And he will filter out who he thinks the choices should be. And if the girl doesn't particularly like the person that the dad feels like is the number one choice, then the dad might have a few options there that he knows that she won't want to marry, and then have the one choice that he wants. So then he will give that daughter the illusion of having her agency and choosing who her number one choice is and going off of her own direction. But the steward decided who those choices are. And so he really has so much power in who her number one choice is.
Yeah. I am gobsmacked. I cannot imagine my dad choosing my husband for me. No thanks. Hard pass. I can do that on my own. And you just have to go through so many people. You can't just go to the girl and be like, hey, I like you. Do you like me? Cool, let's get married.
Yeah, and you know what? They're not supposed to even date until they pretty much have permission to ask. And they can't even date until the guy has basically permission to ask her to marry him. So, and then if they get engaged, then they can date more and they can create feelings for each other. But until they are engaged, everything is so controlled. And then that first date is, if you take somebody on a date, then you're probably going to ask them to marry you in the order.
Wow. So the dances really are the opportunity to figure out if you like someone and talk to them in any sort of normal capacity.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get engaged. How long before you get married?
For me, it was 5 weeks.
What?
Yeah. Yep.
What are the weddings like? Are they a big ordeal or are they just simple?
Each one is different, and it depends too if it's a plural marriage. But they really do go all out on some of these weddings. They're not going to go and rent a huge venue and all that, but they will, and they have some services within the order. But a lot of times they'll use the church building or the rec building or some kind of other commercial building or somebody's house. But they will set up a pretty nice wedding, and then they will have a reception, and it's pretty normal to have a program with the reception where everybody sits like they're at church and watches a program unfold before them. And it's pretty typical to have a standard funny song. And, there's a whole deal that goes around the weddings. Now, if it's a plural wife, sometimes it's not as much because sometimes it kind of feels like they're just adding to the family and they're not as special.
Aww.
And a lot of times the plural wives are secret. Dependent on what number of wife they are and how secretive the wedding needs to be, that'll have a lot to do on how the wedding is set up. But they really do go all out on these weddings and these receptions.
Polygamy is illegal in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's more of like a spiritual wife. There's no paperwork happening. And I learned this from Joe off camera, and I forgot to say on camera that your mom just made up your last name.
Yeah, that's pretty normal for a plural wife.
Yeah.
To just decide what name they want to have. And they will run it by their husband and just see if he's okay with them having that last name. But yeah, she just picks a name. And then she picks a name for the alleged father to put on the birth certificate. And when I was younger, then for some reason she had to pick a guy name that started with the same letter as her name. And then some of the other sister wives did a similar thing and just picked some guy name that happened to start with the same letter. So yeah, there's a whole process to that too.
So do you know who your fake dad's name is?
Yeah, my fake dad name is Phil.
Phil Robinson?
My mom's name is Patricia, so Phil Robinson would be my fake dad's name. And that's the name on my birth certificate. And I remember seeing mail come in that was from the state asking Phil Robinson to pay for child support and pay for basically, I didn't read the letters, but enough to know exactly what they were saying. But it was basically the state coming after Phil Robinson at the address to support his kids.
Right, because no one else is doing it except your mom.
Yeah. And that's the name on the birth certificate, so he should be liable for taking responsibility for his kids.
Well, damn it, Phil.
But,
do your part.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into your mind when you get married, and you must be so conflicted. You talked about this is your duty, and you just knew that that's what you had to do, but you're not really attracted, or were you attracted to your wife?
You know what? I'm not attracted to women. So I see women. There's a lot of beautiful women out there, and I can acknowledge that and really feel that. But when it comes to procreation and all those things, then there's no attraction with any woman. There's no girl in the world that I would want to marry.
Yeah.
So for me, then I really didn't look forward to it at the ceremony and preparing for everything. Then I really just stayed busy. A lot of times the couple will let everybody else help take care of everything, but I was just part of the process of setting everything up and running everything because I just stayed busy and didn't try not to not think about it too much.
Oh, man. And you said you went to public school, so you had more of a sex education, so you knew what your responsibility was as a husband.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not so. I so enjoy having kids. It's the most fulfilling thing that I do with my life. But creating kids is definitely one of the things that one of my least favorite parts of my life is conceiving kids.
Oh, man, that's rough. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I mean, obviously you love your kids and that's amazing, but
Yeah.
just to force someone to do that or make them believe that they have to do that isn't okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your marriage then, as much as you're willing to share, or any ups and downs and things that you had to go through in the order as a married man.
So even after I got married, there was still a lot of pressure to get married again. And I feel like it came not instantly, but a few years in, and there was just more pressure to take on another wife. And it was interesting because I wasn't very high on the biological hierarchy. And so growing up, I would watch pretty much all of the girls my age would marry the same like five guys.
Whoa.
It almost felt like inappropriate for me sometimes to even think about coming forward on somebody because they're probably supposed to marry that one of the Kingston boys. But after, having a family of my own, I was still expected to look for more. And it mostly came from Daniel. My mom would have direction for me, and my kids' mom, my wife at the time would have direction for me. And she would come crying to me sometimes. There was a couple times when she came crying to me with direction that she had. It was so strong, happy tears, as far as I understood them. Like it was like she was so sure that I was supposed to marry this girl and bring her into the family. And for me, it's kind of like a deja vu situation where it's like, okay, I didn't really have direction myself, but I can see where I can pray about it and see where it goes from there. That pressure never ended. Now, I did come out of the closet to Daniel back in 2011 because he kept coming to me with these impressions. So I did come out to him so that he would stop suggesting that I marry girls, and it worked. With Daniel, it worked, but there was still, pressure from my mom and from my ex and the other moms. So
can we talk about that more? Because that's blowing my mind that your now ex-wife would be wanting to add another female to the family. If I were her, I'd be like, no, I think we're good. I had direction that you don't need anyone else. But is it just because the teaching is she can't get into the highest level of heaven unless you practice polygamy?
Yeah, towards the end, and she was the youngest girl in her mom's family. Her parents didn't live polygamy. But all of her sisters did. All of her older sisters lived polygamy. Two of her older sisters, well, one of them left the order, so she didn't live it. But all of them still did marry into, and there's a whole deal there. They all married Brother Ortel's sons, or in my case, a grandson. Two of her older sisters married my dad, and they were very good friends with my mom, and they worked very well with her.
Wait, sorry, hold on. Two of your wife's older sisters married your dad.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And I worked very closely with them. And so I was, they was my mom's, but I would get an idea of what their wages were. And so I saw a lot of what was behind the curtains. So all of her older sisters were in a polygamous relationship. A couple of them were one of two, and both of them were the second wife, but they were one of two. So especially towards the end, and this is probably because I was starting to show signs that I might leave the order, but I had lost my testimony, and towards the end, my ex would tell me, if I'm not going to do what I need to do to gain my salvation, then I need to leave because I'm not worth it. She and the kids deserve a chance to gain the celestial kingdom. And if I'm not going to provide that for them, then I need to leave.
Whoa.
And she's told me that, a few times towards the end. So I left, and now she's a plural wife. So she got what she was asking for.
So when you left and divorced her, they just reassigned her to somebody else?
There was a process to that.
Yeah.
And that's a whole spiel. It's a little bit different. The courting process that I explained is different with a girl that's already married, or that had been married, but she was still capable of bearing children, so she's going to get remarried.
Oh.
And she did, and I won't go into a lot of the process that I saw regarding that, because that's super personal for her. Just over a year after we separated, she was engaged to another man.
Mm. And as far as you know, she preferred it that way because she wanted to live polygamy.
Yeah, I think that in that world, then doing what is expected, there's a lot of mechanics in that world that I guess are good enough for people. And if you're going to be there, then you should follow the process of the world, of that world.
Mm.
I think when you're in an organization, being on the fence is probably the worst place to be. You either need to fit in and enjoy what you have, or you need to leave because there's a certain set of rules in the way you do things, and she fits in with that world. So
Yeah.
that works for her.
Wow. I want to continue talking about what it was like when you got out and when you were finally able to live your authentic self in the outside world. I also want to talk about, though, before we get there, about your mom, if you're comfortable, because I feel like it really illustrates how they distrust the outside world, even when it comes to serious medical conditions.
Yeah. So back in the end of 2013, then my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I wasn't at the doctor's appointments, but it's my understanding that they had a treatment plan for her. And she, did bring that to Daniel. And Daniel had his own program that he wanted to do. But it's also, there's a whole lot of history behind that too, because there's a whole process to fasting. And fasting is a really big part of that culture. And like I'm talking like multiple day fasts. And so it is expected that if you are sick, then you can fast to kill that illness. So Daniel helped come up with a program for her to follow based on the fasting system. And he did do a lot of research in a lot of things, but it became Daniel's program and not what the doctors suggested. Whatever the doctors would say, then that's what we were not going to do, because, they're doctors and they don't know what they're talking about. We are the ones that have keys to Heavenly Father. Daniel is connected to the man on the watchtower. So whatever God wants her to do is going to come from Daniel and not from the doctors. So, but Daniel did do a lot of his own research, and he came up with different systems. Definitely a lot of fasting was involved. He had some different machines, and there was a machine that you would put on the affected area that would cause some kind of electric pulses, or some kind of a pulse generator, and would shock you. And it was even suggested that we would try it out on ourselves, as we would help set up the program for my mom. I tried the pulse machine and different things, and then they would have a diet for her that Daniel came up with. And as my mom was treated, everything around her was controlled. The worse that her condition got, the more control there was, and the more detailed the regimen was, and the more, I guess, disgusting things that she had to eat. Her diet got to a point where she had to eat at exactly this time of day and exactly this, and everything was so detailed out for her, but her body wouldn't always respond to it, and she would throw it up a lot of times. And as I watched it, it looked like she was probably getting less than 500 calories a day that she was actually taking. And we just watched her pretty much die a slow, long, and painful death. And instead of recognizing that it wasn't working and doing something else, when people would say, oh, she's coughing up blood, we got to take her to the doctors, we got to do something, and he would just say, no, we have to buckle down even harder. We have to lean more into the program, and the program would get even harsher. And it got to the point where she had 24-hour supervision, and people were always there to administer the program to her, but they weren't even very consistent. They weren't on the ball with administering the program, but my mom was still expected to be. So I was part of that treatment program towards the end, and there was a day where I had night shift, and I remember in the middle of the night one time, I fell asleep on the watch, I guess, and I was in and out of sleep all night long because I was still, working for one of Downs' biggest legitimate companies, and I was working, 12-hour days there. So I was there to watch her and take care of everything that she needed, but I was falling asleep a little bit in between, and I heard some rustling in the kitchen, and I went in there, and my mom was sneaking some grapes, and she begged me to not tattle on her, and I, mentally, I knew that she wasn't getting the calories that she needed, and so I told her I wasn't going to, and I wouldn't have, because I'm watching her be starved to death. And so, I'm not going to tattle on her for going and sneaking some grapes.
Oh my gosh. What are some of the things that were in the program other than diet?
I don't really know what all of them were. There was, different machines. There was a black salve. I have a lot of that information that I could probably send copies to you too. But Daniel set up a clinic. Around this time is when he was super focused on developing a clinic for him and the order. And they would do so much stuff there, and they used to do so much stuff there now that I don't even know about. But I don't know what would go on in the clinic.
That's so sad that she just couldn't get the help that she needed.
Yeah.
Is that clinic that he set up, was that also for the fertility treatments?
He had been working on that before then, and I think that he sort of combined some things and some things stayed apart. But yeah, there's the fertility treatments, there's the genetics lab, and they've been doing that since the probably pre-2000s. They've been involved with that.
Something you mentioned in Val's video is that even if someone is in prison, they can still get their wives pregnant because they have their semen samples at these clinics.
Yeah. I don't know how they do it, but Daniel told me that they did. And I've seen the equipment that he would use, and he explained it to me. But I don't know how they collected the sample. I didn't ask for information. So
Yeah.
I just know whatever. He does talk a lot. If you hang out with Daniel, he likes to talk about what he's doing. But he called it the Extra Kid Project.
The Extra Kid Project?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
What was your relationship like with Daniel when you came out to him or when you left the order?
I really, really tried to do what I was supposed to do and fill my role in my mom's family. And then, as I got old enough to work for Daniel. And I think that put me in a position where I worked pretty closely with Daniel a lot of the times, and I saw what was behind the curtain in a lot of ways. But it was an interesting position because I feel like growing up, I didn't understand the concept of having a fatherly figure. But as I became a teenager, it felt like he tried to insert his life into mine more, and then get me more involved with his. And so I do feel like that I developed I don't really know that it was much of a relationship, but a little bit of favor with him. And I did try to, it's interesting because we are told constantly that we need to tie to the one above. And so I tried really, really hard to do that, but I never wanted to be like him. And I never did like how he was, but I did everything I could to tie to him. So I feel like we did have a pretty good relationship, and I did do a lot of work for him. A couple years before I left, then I was the CEO of his biggest legitimate company.
Whoa.
So I think that we did have a good relationship for the situation. But it always felt like I have a relationship with him because he needs something from me.
Right.
And he feels like he is entitled to my life. And everything that I have and ever will be, he is entitled to that. And he is supposed to direct that. And I'm supposed to fit in with him and basically offer it up to him. And I feel like I did that a lot. And so the relationship was, I guess, a fairly good one. And then as I was leaving, then he did have some meetings with me, and he seemed like he was pretty sad about it. And one of the meetings, then he was explaining to me how if I leave, then I'm basically going to go to the deepest depths of hell.
Ooh.
And I asked him, well, what if I stay? What would you even see? Considering my situation, you know, in the stewardships and in the family and everything, what do you think I have to look forward to if I stay? And he told me, he says, you will never experience love in this life. And that's just sort of the situation that you have. But if you don't choose this life, then, you know, you're going to go down. And he drew me a diagram where if I stay in this life, I can sort of go up. But if I leave, I'm going to go way down and get down to hell. So, but even from that perspective, and then I have really, really tried. As I left, then it was so hard losing my testimony.
Yeah.
You know, I left when I was 33 years old. I was really grasping at, and it's like you invest so much of your life. And I think that one of the things that's hard about leaving later in life versus, you know, being a teenager or 18 or around 20, when you leave later in life, you realize that you've brought kids into this world. That whole courting program, when I left, my oldest daughter was 10 and a half. And I was recognizing that in less than 2 years, she's going to be on the dance card. And even guys my age are going to be approaching me for her. And whether they're married or not. And I started to like think in my mind, like, how am I going to respond to my friends coming to me about my daughter? And, you know, I started to play that out in my head. And the courting system is one of the main reasons I left, because as I thought it through, like, there's no way I can expect her to do this and feel like I'm doing a good thing by her.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like you're in some ways trafficking your own daughter. And as you watch how some of the other men do it, like, that's something that I'm just not capable of doing. Like, I would so much rather her have the options, you know, get to know the guy, go on a few dates, and figure out what kind of person you want to be with, and then consider, you know, what marriage could be like after then. But I realized, you know, with me wanting what's best for her, I can be as fair as I possibly can in that situation. And it's still not even close to being fair to her. So when you leave later in life, you realize that you brought kids into that program. You know, I realized how much I helped this person who is the most abusive, the most dishonest person I've ever met, and how much I've helped him. And I think that one of the things that's hard is you realize that you were not a good person. You have to accept that you were part of the problem. And I think that that's one of the things that's hard for people that are still in. You know, there's people that leave and then go back. But especially when you're an adult, you either have to recognize that it's a problem and that you were part of that you were part of that problem. Or you can just convince yourself that even though you're now old enough to think logically, even though you're an adult and you're responsible for your life and you know, doing the best you can for your children, you have to recognize that you didn't, and then make a whole new path and change everything, you know, for your kids and everything you're doing. You have to change everything, or you have to sort of just give into it. I feel like you have to just break psychologically. I felt like for me to stay, I would have to go crazy. You know, probably crazy in a way that still looks sane. I think I could have acted sane, But to recognize what you are dealing with and still be there. It's so hard. And I feel like that's a lot of people that have invested so much of their life there, even if they have information that, where they can understand that it's not good, they're probably going to choose to stay because that's still easier than leaving.
Oh, yeah. Staying is always easier, even though you may be uncomfortable or upset or even sometimes physical danger. Usually, staying in the danger that you know feels safer than being in a safer place that you don't know. And especially when you're so isolated in a group and your whole life is wrapped up in the group where you work, your family, your community, your education, everything, if it's all lumped together, it's still the devil that you know. And so leaving, I commend you for leaving. And also, I want to thank you for taking accountability and at the same time, recognizing that you are still a good person and you are still doing what you were taught to do. I mean, we can say that you were part of the problem, but in my heart of hearts, I don't feel like that's true because you were just doing what you were taught and you were pushed into it and you were manipulated into doing it. And now you're speaking out against it and you're taking accountability and doing what you can to bring light to this. So I guess I just want to acknowledge that you did your best with the information that you had. And then when you had more information, you chose to go the hard route, the different route. You chose to find a better life for yourself. And that's really all that you can do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I wonder what that was like for your family when you did come out and you're like, "Hey guys, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." Did you have a sit down with your family? What were their reactions?
So there was multiple family members that were coming to me. They were having dreams. They were coming and talking to me. One of my half moms, my mom had passed away at the time, but one of my half moms came to me saying that she had arranged for me to get an encouragement blessing that her dad would administer. And so there was multiple family members that were coming to me with the direction that they've had. They were heavily leveraging the fact that my mom had passed away. They were telling me that she had come to them in a dream or even come to them in real life saying that they need to come and help me to stay. All of them were telling me that if I leave, I will have to be cut off from my kids. And that's one of the things that Daniel heavily stressed and my ex heavily stressed. And pretty much everybody that I was going to for help was telling me that if I leave, I will have to be cut off from my kids for the sake of for their salvation. So it was kind of interesting because I did feel a lot of love. I've been in their situation before and I've had close family members leave that, and I tried to get them to stay or to come back. And so I understand where their head is at. But they were showering me with their love and their threats at the same time. And so it was just interesting how, especially Daniel, like he would try to control everything about your life by threatening you with everything that you have. And if you and as I would ask questions, because I was genuinely, especially right before I tried to leave, I was genuinely trying to ask questions of Brother Paul and Daniel. And I had a meeting with Brother Paul. I had a meeting with Daniel. And I was just trying to get them to explain certain scenarios that I've experienced where they did things where they just were not accountable at all, where they just they're just in a position where they're not held accountable. And I would just ask Daniel to just offer some kind of explanation. And he just didn't have an explanation. He would just tell me, well, but if you don't trust me and if you don't trust Brother Paul, then just leave. But just know that you're going to have to be cut off from your kids. So that's all that they have to try to explain away anything, is just instead of offering you some kind of explanation and taking accountability, they just have a lot of heavy threats for you. So
Right.
that's what it was like when I was leaving.
Did they ever try to put you through any sort of conversion therapy or try to change your mind about your sexuality?
Yeah. When I initially told Daniel back in 2011 so that he would stop coming at me with direction. He told me that I was gay because I had too much chicken, that there's hormones in chicken. He told me that it's because I work too much, and I don't know if I should say this on camera, but he felt like my ex was a hard person to love, and that she was part of the reason I was gay.
He blamed your ex?
Yeah.
Wow. Really just grasping for anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which most of that he's accountable for because, you know, he set me up with her. Plus, he's the one that had me work too much. So everything but the chicken would be his fault.
Everything but the chicken. Stop.
So.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, as I left, there was other people that blamed her too.
What?
Actually, there wasn't people that was blaming her for me being gay. There was people that was blaming her for me leaving. And so for me, when I left, going through losing my testimony and the faith crisis, you know, that I was dealing with, that was one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life. And I've been through some pretty crazy things. So, and I wouldn't want anybody to have to go through that. And so until I had a period where I can process everything better, I didn't want to explain why I was leaving. I did explain to Daniel and my ex that, you know, I am gay and I don't believe in the principles of the order. They don't align with my core values. So it just doesn't make sense for me to be here. Mm-hmm. It's against or I'm not order material. Like, it just will not work for me to be here. But for the most part, I just really leaned into the being gay part. So that was my scapegoat. I didn't want to explain why I was leaving to everybody and cause them to have to lose their testimony and go through the faith crisis that I was going through. So I just said, I'm gay, so it's not going to work. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, live what I would feel like would be a more fulfilling life.
Did you ever try to go to the mainstream Mormon church after you left?
Well, before I left, as a teenager, because I would go to public school, you know, I had access to the internet, and I would go to the LDS websites and look up whatever I could on how to deal with being gay.
Oh.
And then after I had a family and had several kids, I found a group called Evergreen. And there's different branches of that, but I think that the branch that I found was a more mild version of what they have a reputation for. So I went to Evergreen meetings with LDS people, and that's actually how I got outed initially, because when my ex and I got together, then I didn't share that I was gay because I felt like it was irrelevant and that I was going to do what God wanted me to do anyways. I'm not one of those people that believed that getting married would turn me straight, but I did believe that it was irrelevant because I'm just going to do what God wants me to do. So, but I found this group called Evergreen where there was men in the LDS church that recognized that they were gay and were trying to support each other in living the gospel and staying with their families and just remaining in a mixed orientation marriage anyways.
What was that like?
There were some really great guys there. Like, some of the most Christ-like men were in that group, because they were just there to help you without expecting anything from you. And they were very understanding. There was, as they would share their experiences, there was a lot of feelings that I had exactly. Like, I would use the same words to describe these things, but there was nobody. I thought I was the only one. There was nobody that I could talk to it about. But then I was in this group where there was so many men that were saying the same things and feeling the same things. And obviously they were there to help each other stay with their wives and in their families, and stay true to the church. Mm-hmm. It was hard for me to pretend to be LDS because I feel like the LDS's teachings, they lean so much on Joseph Smith and that story. And we do too, but we have so much of our own narrative, and we don't have temples, we don't have garments, and we're so different. There's so many things of the LDS church that we didn't pick up. So I would have to come out of the closet and confess that I'm actually not LDS. And with my name being Nephi, they would just assume that I was.
Yeah.
So instead of getting found out, I would just open up about that. And so I would share that I'm not LDS. I am from a fundamental LDS group, and I would try to go into, you know, very little detail on that, because just enough to say that, you know, I have we read the Book of Mormon too, mm-hmm. and we have a lot of the same beliefs that you do. So that's why I'm here. But it was definitely an interesting experience going to Evergreen And I have a lot of respect for so many of the people that were there. It really is hard for me to say that I respect the program. And even at the time, there was men there that weren't married, and they were going there to try to prepare themselves to enter into mixed orientation marriage. And there was just so much that was confusing to me. Like, why are people gathering together to encourage this situation?
Mm-hmm.
So I had mixed feelings about it then, but they're great people. But I really don't support the motive and the message that they have.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about how you're doing now. I mean, when you came out into the mainstream world and you realized that you had options and that you could be whoever you wanted to be, what was that like?
You know what? It's a whole different world. And when you have kids still in that group, you still have so much responsibility. So definitely one of the first things I had to do was make sure that I was stable enough to, pay child support and make sure that they was taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when you break out of an economy and you have to go find your place in the market, then at 33 years old, it's really complicated. And I feel like I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself. And I feel like I should have, but for the first month, I just slept in my car. And then there was somebody in another group that had a bunk bed when their kid was that was also divorced and didn't always have his kids with him. So when he didn't have his kids with him, then I would go sleep in his kids' bunk bed. And then a few weeks after that, then my grandma found out that I had left. Initially, I kept it fairly quiet, but she reached out to me and offered me a room to stay. But it was several months after I left that I had an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment in West Valley. It's been a kind of a battle the whole 7 years. So, but I still am focused on making sure that my kids are okay. And I feel like I've come a long way since I've left. I'm actually doing pretty well now. I got a good job, and I feel like I'm able to find a place where I can be competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're taught in the order to work and to be productive and industrious, when you apply that outside of the order, that's helpful too. So it took me a while to find where I could fit in, but I'm actually doing a lot better now. Obviously, it's still really complicated with the kids and, child support. And there has been years of legal work. One thing that I made very clear when I left to Daniel, to my ex, and anybody who was telling me that I would have to be cut off from my kids, I would tell them that nothing will ever relieve me of the duties that I have to them. And it's a lot more than just financial. And if I have to exercise the legal system to make sure that I'm in a position to take care of those duties, then I will.
Yeah.
There's been tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and years in court. Right now, things are pretty mellow, but the kids are growing up. My oldest is almost 18, and I'm not supposed to know, but she's engaged. My youngest is 8.
Uh-huh.
So, and we just had a good, vacation together, and, I'm still really active with them.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm so glad that they weren't able to keep you from them. You sent me a picture from Lagoon. I'm like, oh, that's so
Yeah.
nice. Taking your kids out, because it's so great that you are still very dedicated and adamant that you want to be in their lives and still be that father figure to them. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what else? How are you doing? What brings you joy and happiness and peace?
I'm doing pretty good. It feels like having a second chance of life,
Mm-hmm.
to spend 33 years of your life in that group and then find a way out of it and then find a way to sort of find your place in the world. I feel like I'm still in that position now. I'm doing a whole lot in just trying to get to know myself, and I've had a chance to detox from that world. I've had a boyfriend for a while. I'm currently single, but I think that when you leave a organization like that, then you're probably not ready for a relationship, and I had to have one to recognize that.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a break. I think that you probably explained on your channel how you've taken a couple years break.
Oh, yeah.
Before you met Jonathan.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at. I've been single for about 1.5 years now, just focusing on myself and where I fit in with the world, and most of all, what do I need to do to make sure that my kids are in a good position. So
Yeah.
that's what I'm doing lately.
You're so selfless. Even I'm like, what are you doing for you? And you're like, well, just making sure my kids are doing great. It's awesome. I just hope that you are really focusing on you and finding your true happiness, because especially growing up all the way up until 33, living a life for someone else where you really aren't able to be yourself. Everyone is making decisions for you.
Mhm.
You're just going along and just, I don't know, day-to-day surviving. Now you have the option to thrive. And
Yeah.
so I really hope that you're doing that for yourself.
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, good. Well, let's do the Linda Listen moment. Sassy statement or something a little more inspirational, up to you.
Okay, I'm going to go with trust in your creator and to thine own self be true.
Ooh, isn't that part of a scripture?
I think it is. I don't know what the scripture reference
Me
is,
neither. I'm really bad at those.
though.
But yeah, that's great advice. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Nephi. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
I don't think so. I mean, I've seen so much. I could go into a whole lot of stuff, but I think that I think we've done pretty good. So
Wow. He's like, I got many more episodes in me. Don't tempt me like that, Nephi.
yeah, yeah. What do you want to know about?
Yeah, well, guys, let us know in the comments if you want us to keep going into some of the things. What are some of the topics that you think you could expand on if people were interested?
Actually, and Amanda has explained this too. When you leave the order, you are alienated from your family members,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like that's because the leaders themselves understand how vulnerable that belief system is, and that if somebody inserts a little too much critical thinking, it could fall over like a house of cards. So I feel like that the reason that they have to isolate you so much and say terrible things about the people that leave is because they are actually insecure about their ideology.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to demonize those who leave so that anything that they say can no longer be trusted in the eyes of the people who are in.
And probably with the LDS church too, a little bit, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. It may not be as extreme as far as no, you can't even talk to your parents. It depends on who your family is.
Mhm.
Some people ostracize their children and
Yeah.
say, you're not my child anymore. Some people, of course, we love you, whatever you want to believe, just, keep coming over for dinners on Sunday or whatever it is. Of course, there's a huge range of that. But I mean, they've said it from the pulpit in general conference many times, demonizing people who leave, don't trust them, or they've fallen away, or separate the wheat from the tares, and, all those things that put in their minds not to trust us, even if they're still being kind to us. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, you know that they have a lot to hide too.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
There's
yeah.
that side of it.
Oh, yes. That's a whole episode for sure of all the
Uh-huh.
things that they hide from you to keep you in.
Yeah.
And then once people leave and they're like, you guys need to know about this from over here, it's too late. I've already been demonized. No one's going to listen to me anymore. So
Exactly.
it's tricky. Well, this has been awesome. Do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
Nope, I don't think so.
If you want to follow Nephi, go to his Facebook. I will put the link in the description. You can reach out to him if you want to say hi or you have comments or messages for him. You can do that. Well, guys, leave those words of encouragement for Nephi down below. Your comments mean the world to us and to our guests. It helps boost the algorithm as well. Interacting with the video, liking, sharing is the best way to support the podcast. But if you want to support further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. You can get some of our merch at cults2consciousness.com. We need to update our merch. If you guys have any ideas, let us know in the comments. And our Costa Rica vacation is sold out, but you can add your name to the wait list if you want to be notified for the next trip. And that's all. If you like this video, I'll leave 2 more down here below. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious and be well.